Oh, okay.
All right. Howdy, y'all. Welcome to the Heels of Time podcast number 5. How you doing today,
Yeah.
Derek?
I'm doing good, Theo. How are you?
I'm doing well myself.
And I'm about to get a little bit better.
Oh, what you doing, man?
Some of that Dionysian wine left over from episode 2.
That sounds good to me, man. Sounds good to me. So, today we got a real special episode. We're going to continue on with Balzamon. And you're going to say, really, again? Yes, that's how badass this son of a bitch is. So we're going to do a little etymology, little wordplay here. So you know how we said
Yes.
Balzaman. So we did our last episode, in case you guys didn't catch it, was on the Egyptian god Aman, or Amun, depending on how you want to call it.
Right, right.
So you're like, huh? The beginning looks a little funky, right? Has an interesting spelling, and we've noticed a lot of patterns that Robert Jordan, we think, put in there on purpose. And this one may not be a shock or like a mic drop thing, but there was a god back in the day called Baal, spelled the same way, Ba'Al.
Very
Go
interesting.
figure. Um, he was actually pretty interesting, and I have some surprises for my co-host Derek,
So, so
which will
real
come on a little bit
quick,
later. But
so
what
real
what what's
quick,
up? Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I just want to ask a question to kind of prime the audience a little bit.
I'll do my best.
Are you talking about one of the princes of hell?
Kind of,
But
but not.
okay.
So, technically speaking, you could kind of say yes, because you know how like a lot of gods got I want to say imported from paganism into Christianity, and they're just kind of like they may have been ancient, and then it makes it so easy just to kind of absorb them, just to make people go to your own religion a little bit easier. Technically
Okay.
speaking, yes, Baal's the
Okay.
same guy. However, he's way older than what we consider like one of the demonic princes.
Got it. Got it. All right. So
So
we're
I,
touching on a very special topic then, as you said. So the floor is yours, my friend.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. So the Epic of Baal, whatever you want to call him, is it's pretty ancient. So it actually is around the area of Syria, but we're talking back. So for those of you for that like ancient histories, there were some tablets that were found. They weren't perfect. By all means, they were broken, and they're etched because they were tablets. So it kind of rubbed away, broke apart. However, they
Got it.
told this story, and they were found in the 1920s.
Okay.
However, they give or take date back to about 1500 or so BCE. Um,
And that's so
BCE,
that would
that's
be like
before the Common Era.
3,500 years ago is what you're talking,
Yeah,
right?
pretty much.
Whoa.
That's what the tablets date to. They're actually thinking that the story of this particular being was before that.
Oh, that's
So we're
crazy.
talking almost like Ra, like that old, probably is my guess. That's a non-educated, ask.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna take that story first. So this guy was pretty dang powerful, but it wasn't the utmost, most powerful god at the time of his birth. His birth is in quotes. It's not. That's not really talked upon. But his lineage isn't like a direct. He's the king. Boom. He's the automatic king. That's not him.
Okay, interesting.
So he kind of like had to work his way up. Hence the cycle.
Okay. Oh,
So
okay.
the cycle takes place over actually, like if you want to call them chapters, because there were 3 different tablets that were found, each depicting him kind of rising to power, if you want to call it rising to power.
Okay,
So
I like that.
um, he's called the son of Dagon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's different than the biblical one, but that's okay. His actual moniker has many titles: the Rider of Clouds, Almighty, Lord of the Earth. If you want to call him a god of thunderstorms, sure. So he could be a sky god.
Rider of Clouds. That's a really cool one.
Yeah, right. It's pretty interesting, and yeah, some interesting things. He's aggressive, vigorous, if you want to call him in that regard. He based in a. I know I'm gonna butcher this, but it's Mount Xiphon, and it's north of Ugarit. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that particularly correct, but that's a high mountain in Syria. I don't know if it's translated now, but that's the geographical location in quotes, kind of like Mount Olympus. It's
Okay.
there, but yeah.
And that was like the ancient name of the city.
Right.
For our viewers, one more time.
Ugarit.
All right.
Again, pronunciation not my strong suit. Sorry.
Sure.
So he goes to war because he's like, man, I think I should really be cool. And the main mega god is El. Just
Okay.
El. And he's like the king, and he's like, well, you maybe kick ass, and you're really nice, and I think you're a pretty powerful guy. However, and my son is actually my son, so of course he's gonna be number one.
Favoritism.
Little nepotism there. Baal's like, that's not cool. So, no. So he usurps power from him. And they're like, well, okay. So El's like, well, that's not cool. But sister, some of the other gods were like, well, dude, he's actually pretty powerful, El. He's pretty good. And he's like, well, all right, I'm getting older, and obviously if my son couldn't, take him, all right, yeah, you're gonna meet our mascot soon. I knew it was gonna happen eventually. My kitty likes to come and get hype in front of the camera, so sorry guys if you see that. Yeah, I'm sure she'll make an effort to interrupt me again. So anyway, he then
she wants us to talk more about Egypt.
Probably. Even though she's named Merida, whatever, But, go figure. So anyway, they're like, well, okay, cool. So they're like, man, you should build him this. That's first chapter. Second chapter is like, man, I'm an awesome man. Build me a damn palace. And he's like, I don't want to build a palace. And everyone's like, you kind of should build him a palace. It's like, all right, fine, we'll build him a palace. So that's chapter 2. End cycle is Mot, M-O-T, equivalent of the personification of death. And he's like, so, bro, why don't you come down to meet me, and let's see who's the most victorious. So this is where it gets a little hazy, because this is where the tablets get a little disruptive. We don't know. Interpretation could be he was killed. Interpretation was that he wasn't, and is just kind of like hidden away. Tough to say. But the other gods don't really.
And we're talking about Baal.
We're talking about Baal. We're talking about Baal going down
Okay.
into the underworld.
Oh, okay.
And that's where we don't know. Does Mott kill him? Does he just kind of disappear? Does he go away for a while? All we know is that he's like gone.
Okay.
No one really knows where he is, so to speak. Well, people don't take too kindly to this. His sister Anath, called the Maiden, is like, no, that's not cool, and is like super angry, and she basically murders Mott and then disperses his body everywhere.
Okay.
And then, bam, Baal's like, what? And Mott's like, what? Because, they're guys, they don't really die. Hence the cycle. Mott's like, well, all right, you're actually pretty powerful, so I will bow to you. And he then becomes basically the supreme ruler. El becomes old.
Okay.
Because he's elderly,
Kind of like
so
Ra.
to speak. Kind of like Ra. And he's like, well, okay, I will. It's about that time for me just to like step back, and that's fine. So that's his story in a nutshell. But there's more to him than just that.
Okay.
So he also can be determined as a sun god.
Really?
Yep.
Oh,
And
that's bizarre.
what you want to think about is in this particular setting, it's cyclical. So you could say, oh, he's the god of thunderstorm, god of fertility, god of all these things. Well, then Mott comes around and kills him, but that also is like the cycle of the seasons.
Okay,
So as
so
one wanes, the other one kind of
mm,
sort of takes power, and then the other one comes back to power and wanes, and so it's just a cycle of time.
so if I could make an amateur guess here, I would say Mott would probably what represent like the fall, the winter.
As stuff as the fertility cycle ends in the area.
That makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
So that's cool. And then here's the kicker. I'm gonna read you something, Derek.
Oh no.
Yeah, let me see. I had
Better
it.
finish this.
Yeah, you should finish it. I'm gonna read you this one particular passage.
Go for it.
So, I'm gonna butcher some names, but one is gonna be pretty interesting.
One
to you.
might stand out a little bit. Is that what you're
Just a
saying?
little. So do you want me to do it now, or that? I'll say
for it.
one
No,
other
no, no.
factor. So he
for
also
it.
kills some serpents, kills some reptiles, a sea dragon in particular, called Yam.
Oh, okay.
So he kills them too. That's not the kicker. The kicker is actually within the text of the epic epic cycle of Baal. I'll read it. From excerpt down about halfway through, it says, "Then she sets face toward El, in the sources of the two rivers. In the midst of the streams of the two deeps, she enters the abode of El, and comes in the domicile of the king father Sheneu." I'm gonna butcher that one. "At the feet of El, she bows and falls. She prostrates herself and honors him."
Wow, wow.
So I thought I'd leave Derek with that little mic drop, because
So-
we mentioned something
yeah.
about a certain name right there. Two rivers.
Yeah. So
Where's Rand from?
Rand is raised in the Two Rivers, actually.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Kinda
Wow,
interesting,
that's
right?
really cool. Yeah, yeah.
Focus, what does
No,
that have to do
definitely.
with Balsamon? So another little tidbit
Okay.
is there's another theory about him, in that during the English Puritan era, this is when I said, Baal isn't necessarily the demonic creature.
Sure. Yeah,
During
yeah.
the English Puritan period, he was equated with Satan, or considered his main lieutenant.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's something.
So that's Baal in a nutshell, at least for now.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot of similarities here,
Oh,
other than
yeah.
just the spelling of names.
Yeah, for sure.
So holler at me. What do you think about this in terms of what Robert Jordan may have pulled from, and where you see some similarities?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, for starters, I gotta touch one more time on. Balsamon being associated with the Two Rivers. Oh, I just got a word that there's a little bit of echo in our mics, so you may want to turn your speakers down a little bit, Theo.
Okay, I can do that. I thought I heard something, but I was like, no one's saying anything, so that's cool.
Okay, so here goes. Two Rivers. Rand is not born in the Two Rivers, but he's from the Two Rivers. That's where he's raised. That is the first place that Balsamon sends his Trollocs to kind of sniff out the situation, try to figure out where the dragon is. Now, I'm going to rewind, though, a little bit. You said that Balsamon, or this is going to be difficult because of the name similarity here. So you said that Baal was a killer of dragons, kind of like. Now, where is the Ugaritic? It's northern Syria, which is they have a coastline, right? The Mediterranean, So most likely this would be like a sea dragon. And you may have said that right out. Um, but the root that we're looking for is it's a dragon. Um, if we rewind a little bit to the age of legends in Randland, which I think is a couple thousand years before Rand comes around, uh, Balzamon goes to the original dragon, Luz Theron, Telamon, maybe El Amon, maybe. Okay, L is in his name. That could be a coincidence. Nothing big there. Not really something we're going to spend a lot of time on. But he goes to Luz Theron, the dragon, and this is after he made a mess of things in his own house. Luz Theron, I mean. And Belsman is kind of like, fool, you don't even know what you did. So does a little bit of dark magic, and all of a sudden Luz Theron knows exactly what he did, and nukes himself. Now, Belsman basically slays the dragon. He slays Yam, basically, here.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the cycle goes, the wheel of time turns, right? And, legend turns to myth, and even myth is forgotten when the age that spun out, so to speak. Rand is reborn as the dragon anew. So this is very much like the seasonal cycle that you mentioned. It's kind of a reoccurring thing. Now, what was interesting to me is you said that Baal disappears for a while. Maybe he's even destroyed.
Right.
Well, after the breaking of the world, Balzamon is sealed away with the other Forsaken, kind of. And I believe, if memory serves correctly, every 1,000 years, he gets to come out for 40 years. Every 1,000 years, 40 years. And every time he does, he makes a mess of things.
Makes sense.
And now Balzamon, as we've mentioned before, he is one of the strongest channelers of the One Power, and specifically for the menfolk. Let me break this down. The One Power is broken up into 5 elements, like the band Earth, Wind, and Fire. Okay, but they also have water, and they also have spirit. So maybe more like Captain Planet: Earth, Fire, Wind, Water, Heart, but spirit instead of heart. So where are men most proficient in? Well, they're most proficient in earth and fire. And the fire would definitely be associated with lightning, right? Which would be associated with storms. And that is what, the people would have feared back in the day, the thunder and the lightning, not so much the rain. Although the rain can lead to floods and whatnot, but definitely the fire they're kind of afraid of. The rain they're kind of more hoping comes for their crops, right?
Yep.
And in this interpretation of Baal, he's kind of like a fertility kind of god. I wouldn't exactly say that about Balzamon, but that's okay. So here's an interesting fact. So you mentioned that when Baal is destroyed or dispersed or just gone into the underworld, who takes over? Mott, right?
Death. Yep.
And Mott is death.
Mm-hmm.
So within Wheel of Time Randland lore, Balzamon eventually is destroyed. So it seems.
Right.
But he comes back in a fresh new body named Moradin. Now, what does Moradin mean in Randland? Death. So fulfilling the cycle. Balzamon disappears. Moradin takes his place. Baal disappears. Mott takes his place. Very interesting parallel there, I think.
I would think so. Quick question for you.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
So-
go for it.
I personally don't think Baal is a bad guy.
Oh, okay.
I didn't say Balzamon. I said Baal.
Okay.
Because I don't really think I don't think they meant him as like an evil god or anything. I think that's what it kind of
Sure.
warped into like more into Christianity terms.
Sure.
What do you think about Balsamon? Do you think he's an actual super baddie,
You
or
know,
do you think
that's
he's
a
a little,
very
or do you think he's from a certain point of view?
yeah, no, that's a very interesting question. I'm glad you asked that because here's the thing about Balzamon. Back in the day when he had some, he wasn't going by Balzamon, and we'll get to why that's his moniker in a minute. But back in the day, he followed Lews Therin. Kind of like how you mentioned that El appointed his son Yam to be the ruler, and Balzamon was like, nah, or Baal, pardon me, audience,
Yeah.
was like, nah, I'm not taking that. So Balzamon did his own research once they found out about the Dark One. And he goes, you know what? Probability wise, it looks like if the Dark One wins just once, it's over. But the heroes, the light, has to beat the shadow every single time. So, statistically speaking, if this cycle goes on forever and ever, the Dark One's going to win one day. So, what he didn't understand is it's such a cycle that everything that's going to happen has already happened in some kind of way.
Gotcha.
So he kind of got his philosophy a little bit wrong. But because of that, he came to a very, let's just say, rational and logical conclusion that there's not really any hope here. And one of his monikers is the Slayer of Hope, as it turns out, if I'm remembering that right. And I'm sure someone will correct me and give
If
me
you're
all
wrong,
kinds
yeah.
of garbage if I'm wrong about that.
Yeah.
But he came to a very rational and logical conclusion that, look, there is no reason to go on with this. And if we do, I'm going to be stuck fighting Lews Therin, the dragon,
Over
forever
and
and
over
ever
and
and
over.
ever in a wheel, or in terms of Baal, in a
Cycle.
cycle.
Never
Baal is
ending.
stuck fighting Yam forever and ever and ever, and either becoming Mott or fighting Mott forever and ever and ever, depending on, like you said, depending on the translation. So when he came to this conclusion as a philosopher,
Yeah, we still got an echo. I can't figure it out.
okay, if you want to try to turn your speakers down a little bit, but
I did.
obviously you need to hear me.
Yeah.
So we'll get this fixed one day,
Yeah,
audience.
eventually. Yeah. Sorry for the. Sorry.
Anyone, we'll get Theo some good headphones. We'll figure it out. But bear with us, please. Right. So Balsamon goes, we need to just end this. We need to just let the Dark One win, and I don't want to be doing this forever. Because if you think about it from Balsamon's point of view, that's kind of like hell. He's trapped. So I like what you said about Baal's not really evil. He's kind of stuck in this story, so to speak. And Balsamon also is kind of stuck. And he's like, my only way out would be to end it all. So he thinks, and maybe wrongly, but possibly we get a little bit of a hint that maybe this could have been an option. That if the Dark One takes over, he's not going to come to Earth and make like a new palace or a new kingdom in his name and have everyone bow down and worship him. He might just end it all permanently. Break the wheel, break the cycle. So Balsamon goes, you know what? That's not a bad idea, because I don't want to be doing this forever. Like, I'm stuck against my will being the bad guy for all of time. That's not fair. So in a way, he's kind of a little selfish, but also altruistic, because it's a whole force of the shadow that's stuck fighting the light, if in other words, kind of against their will, because they're made to play their part in the story. Like Shakespeare once said, life is a stage, there are entrances and exits, and we all play a part. And that was a terrible paraphrase, but whatever.
Good enough.
So here's something that's interesting, departing from that, and thank you for that. You mentioned that Baal is associated with Mount Zaphon, a real-to-life gigantic mountain found in Syria somewhere. Okay?
Correct. Yep.
Well, in the death of the dragon, Lutheran, where he dies, a mountain is created that they refer to as Dragon Mount. And because Baal slays Lutheran, you can think that, well, okay, that's also going to be associated, and I said Baal, but I meant Baal-Zaman, pardon me.
Yeah. I got
Okay,
you.
that's also going to be associated with Baal-Zaman. I'm going to be doing that a lot because, let's be real, the parallelism is spitting in our face. And I don't want to take credit where credit's not due. A lot of folks, and probably Jordan himself, have pointed out the connection with Baal and Baal-Zaman. However, we want our audience, our listeners, to understand that there's more interpretation than just saying, oh, he's one of the princes of hell. We're trying to go way, way, way back into the clay tablets, as Theo pointed out, to see what the original Baal may have been, and to kind of point out, to kind of give props to the late, great Robert Jordan. He did his research. He was well read. So moving on, Baal, in some versions, when he's defeated, or at least temporarily defeated by Mot, he's spread into ashes.
Yep.
Okay?
Spread around.
Well, check this out, Theo. When Rand is able to, and Rand is the dragon, when Rand comes around in the circle and he's able to destroy Baal-Zaman, he thrusts his sword into Baal-Zaman's heart, and immediately Baal-Zaman does what? He crumbles into ashes.
Dust. Yep.
To dust. Exactly. So it's, a very interesting parallel there, especially when, let's think about reality. How many times do you stab someone in the heart and they crumble into dust?
A lot of times if you're a vampire.
Okay. So, hey, maybe Baal-Zaman's Dracula. That's for another show. So very, very interesting. So check this out. You mentioned that Baal, in a more modern interpretation, was described as being Satan's main lieutenant.
Yep.
Well, a couple things here that kind of parallel that. By the Trollocs, and these are kind of like the disciples of the Dark One in a way. They're twisted, half-human, half-beast creatures. Baal-Zaman is worshipped by the Trollocs. In fact, they believe he's the Dark One himself. Now, more interestingly, the forces of Shadow, the thinking ones, you see the Trollocs are not exactly the brightest bulbs in the bunch, but the actual thinking people of the Shadow, they understand that either by commandment from the Dark One himself, or just kind of Baal-Zaman usurping and flexing his muscles, so to speak, he becomes basically the great general of the Dark One, or his right-hand man, or left-hand man, lieutenant. So that seems very striking to me.
Well, it's funny that you bring up the Trollocs again, with
Okay.
the ram's head and everything,
Yeah.
because that's kind of how Baal was depicted too, with a couple horns.
Really?
So, hence why the demon, because the horns.
Oh,
But
okay.
you could also say that, back in the day, ram's horns, because kind of interesting, right? Kind of
Yeah,
parallels to other gods that we've touched upon previously, with two plumes that turned into ram's horns eventually, and a ram head. Amon.
No, for sure. Yeah.
So
yeah.
interesting that you said that. Thought I'd bring that up real quick.
So wow, that's interesting. So we're finding this kind of similar connection with Amon and Baal, and maybe that's why Robert Jordan put these two together. From our kind of idiot layman point of view, speaking for myself, I mean, we have Professor Theo over here.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well,
I'll
he's
take
really
it.
solid on his knowledge.
I'll take it.
I can
Sometimes.
attest to that. So, yeah. So, worshipped by the Trollocs, which Robert Jordan makes a point of saying, yeah, they could have a bird head. Yeah, they could have a pig snout. Yeah, they could have hooves or men's feet. but he specifically says in a reoccurring fashion that they could have ram's horns as often as not. So that seems like a very specific thing to call out, since these Trollocs can really be any kind of beast, really. So there seems to be that he's kind of, underlining and pointing out the Rams Horn Association.
So I have a
the link
question.
to Rams.
Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Finish your thought, man.
No, go ahead.
Did Balsamon, because I know it's been a minute since I read the books, but did he have a weapon of any sort?
Yes, as a matter of fact. So Balsamon fought with a staff, specifically kind of this special enchanted staff that, picture like a torch, right? So a torch gives off light, and if you cast it like next to the wall, it gives off kind of like a glow and kind of disperses the shadows. Well, his staff was like the opposite. It absorbed light, and in a way where if you set it next to a torch, it would dim the torch relative to where you're putting the staff.
Interesting. I only bring that up because Bale can be also depicted with having a mace or a battle axe, and then on the other hand with like thunderbolts. So
Okay, well,
that's kind of cool.
A mace or a staff mace. No, that fits very nicely. And if the lightning bolts, I mean, Balsamon being so strong in the power and being a male, oh yeah, he definitely.
And he flew around a little bit, didn't he?
Bolt. What was that?
Didn't he fly around a little bit?
So this is interesting. Yeah, Balsamon couldn't fly per se.
No.
Possibly in the Age of Legends they allude to that, but in modern Randland time, so to speak, he considers himself the master of the dream world, like Freddy Krueger style. But also, he's such a master of it, and this is kind of like, instead of just like a dream world, it's more like Stranger Things, like with the upside down, right? It mirrors Earth in a weird kind of funky way. And he's able to literally project himself and Rand into the sky, and they do a battle in the sky. So in that regard, yeah, he's kind of part of the air. But in real quick to add to that, he can also travel, which this is a rare talent. It allows him to literally rip a hole in reality and just walk through it and show up wherever he wants. So in that regard, yeah.
Rand can do that too, though.
Eventually.
Well, he's got to learn it. He's got to learn his skills.
Because at first, kind of like Ra, he skims. So skimming takes time. And you have to go to this kind of netherworld region.
Yeah, but you can't just go to like 2 points and pass right through it.
Right. Now,
Event Horizon style.
Right. But eventually, yes, Rand will be able to do this as well. And in kind of like, because everyone has to understand, yeah, Rand is similar to Apollo, he's similar to Ra, sure, but he also is on the hero's journey. And that's something that we'll eventually dissect. We'll take an episode to talk about the classical Greek hero journey, so to speak. But yeah, eventually he does get that power too. And as a matter of fact, kind of symbolizing Rand's knowledge and the ancient world's idea of connecting knowledge to the great serpent, Rand is able to share this information, and many more folks are able to do it.
Interesting.
So yeah.
So he teaches folks too.
Right. Oh yeah, he's a great teacher.
Super teach.
So yeah. So a few more points about Balsamon before I forget them, based on the things that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If correct me if I'm wrong, but it's referred to the Ugaritic Bale cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's something like, and you said seasons particularly. And it goes around and around and around.
There's one theory of it, correct. Yep.
So is there any kind of like alternate theory that talks about maybe instead of like a cycle, possibly just like a specific event or anything like that?
What do you mean?
Well, in our pregame, you mentioned something about like a terrible drought.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, so okay, so that's what I'm saying. Like he's not necessarily like the most like an evil god or like Punisher or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you can equate like droughts and the seasons and oh if you really want rain or if you're a mariner, he's not like Zeus who's gonna like throw down thunderbolts. That's not
Okay.
really what he does.
Yeah.
It's more like the controller of the air. Hence why he like is in the air, and he's like the not necessarily controller
Okay.
of the seas, but of like I don't say tides either. I don't think they really want to call it tide, but it's damn cat. But he he's like the rider of the clouds, so he can bring upon that drought, or he can bring about the rain.
Okay. Well, check this out.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So check this out. In Randland, at first, when the series kind of starts, you're subjected to this terrible winter that looks like it's just never gonna end. So that might be kind of like Bale's Mott persona
I
kind of
was gonna
taking
say that's
over.
when Mott takes over when his power is waning. If you're talking about the cycladic
Mm-hmm.
cycle of the
Mm-hmm.
seasons.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
But then after that, just when they think, oh, thank goodness, winter's over, right? Like for the Game of Thrones fans out there, winter is coming, right? Well, winter's over, and it's over in a terrible way because they go straight from unseasonable winter and cold to unseasonable summer and drought with heat just inevitable. Like it looks like
Unbearable
the
heat.
unbearable heat. Like the Earth is gonna cook, okay, or Randland is gonna cook. So that that's kind of that reminds me very much of like okay, we have this seasonal god kind of has control over when the rains or the snows are going to come, kind of has control over when the summer is going to start or how long it's going to last. And that definitely has Belzamon definitely kind of has a hand to play. So he's kind of, the way I see him, and this is kind of my interpretation. So the Dark One is kind of sealed away, kind of. He can
Dish.
kind of be
Push.
close to us, kind of, but he's always kind of far away. Now he needs people to directly influence things, at least at this point. And it seems like Balzamon really is kind of like has a two-way connection to the Dark One, and it's kind of like it's almost like it's not like he's giving him suggestions and the boss is like, okay, do that, but it's more almost like they have a synergy, like where Balzamon's like, all right, let's do this, and the Dark One gives him power to do it. So I would say there's a close connection to the fact that okay, well the Dark One's touching the world. Well, not exactly. It's probably more Balzamon doing it. So yeah, I would say Balzamon's very much responsible for that winter and the drought.
That makes
Um,
sense because
if anyone wants to argue that point, go right ahead.
more power. Let's see if anybody has a different theory on that, and it'd be interesting to debate it. That'd be cool.
Absolutely. So the last thing I have that came to mind, and we kind of talked about a little bit, but I want to specifically address this. You mentioned that Baal has all these different titles, like Rider of Clouds.
Yep.
Well, we see Balzamon literally in the sky. Um, we say Balzamon is, or Baal is also almighty. Baal is considered just as strong as the dragon, or Balzamon is considered just as strong as the dragon Luthor and Telamon. We see that he is the Lord of the Earth. Well, not exactly the same, but Balzamon's name literally means heart of darkness. So in the Trolloc tongue, and it's the Trollocs that gave him this title. So in a similar way that Baal is bestowed upon these titles, hi Kitty,
Yeah, she won't leave me alone. Sorry, guys.
Balzamon is given a title by the Trollocs. And even though in Randland, the Trollocs are definitely beasts, you can, again, I mentioned this once before, you can definitely think of them as his disciples. So his followers,
Sure.
his cultists, so to speak. So with all that being said, Theo, what do you think? Am I going off on the deep end here? Am I crazy? Is it just like, oh, that's a cool name, so I'm going to use it, or do you think there's some real parallels
No,
here?
I think there's parallels. I mean, especially if you combine both the names, Baal, Amun. You can almost with the Z, you can almost throw in Zeus up in there because of all like the storm
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
like
We didn't even
like
touch
the
on that.
storms, like the lightning bolts, and
Mm.
the mega. I don't want to say he's a mega god, but I mean if Balzaman is legit, like he is not necessarily the number one super mega baddie in the entire universe. He's probably the number two.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. For
And
sure, for sure.
if you look at Bale, he kind of like had to work his way up through the ranks. If you look at
Well,
him through,
yeah.
more modern interpretation, he's like a demonic prince, not a king, but the
Mm-hmm.
prince.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A lieutenant in the Satan's command. So
Yeah,
he's
that
like
puts him
maybe
right
like
at
the
number
number
two.
two guy.
Absolutely.
Um, so I think that is a clever play on several words. It sounds cool too, of course, but I think that if you broke it down, did like words and you took like little bits of all these different cultures, popped them together, who's the number one or number two god in each of these different areas of geographical areas, you basically combine them into one being in characterization and in name.
For sure.
So no, I don't think that you're falling off the deep end or anything because there's a lot of similarities in everything we've gone through in the last couple weeks in this with this
Yeah.
particular character, at least in our humble
All right.
opinions, that
Yeah, yeah.
are very they run very parallel. Again, not
Very
exact, but
good, man.
parallel. So I don't
Very
think we're that
good.
far off.
Especially like when you say it all together, you have Balzaman and Shaitan. And then you have Baal, Zeus, Amon, Satan.
Right.
Wow. All right, man.
I think we're
Well,
doing.
I'm gonna give you the last word then.
So to sum it up, we've gone through the main protagonist, probably his chief antagonist, at least for the majority of the books. Next week, we're gonna go a little bit different. We're gonna leave that for a surprise, but it's a really cool character. It's a she. So we haven't gone through any female characters, and they are extremely prevalent in the book, which is very cool. You don't see a lot of that in writing back in the '90s, at least. So I think that was really cool. So
Nice.
we're gonna go on a little female trek for a while. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Perfect.
No
Perfect.
spoilers,
season, man.
no extra spoilers or anything. But I think this
Yeah,
is
we're already spoiling Wheel of Time. We don't
No,
need to
yeah.
spoil our own show.
Yeah, exactly. So
So
I think the next one's gonna be really cool.
excellent, excellent. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it may be maybe one of my favorite episodes that we've done so far, or that
All
we will be
right.
doing, I guess you could say. So again,
So
we are the Heels of Time.
Yeah.
I'm Theo. This is Derek,
Yeah.
and please hit us up, like us. We're on Twitch. Sorry for the audio stuff. Hope I got that fixed. We'll see. Otherwise, have a good week.